All right, welcome back to the 6th episode of Investigating the BMF in St. Louis. Once again, we appreciate all the support, the likes, the subscribes, the shares. Really goes a long way in helping us out. And that's all we ask of you. And the comments, love the comments too. But before we get started, we always like to thank our sponsor, Kessler Williams Law Firm, our friend JD, John Davis there. Kessler Williams Law Firm specializes in defense work in white collar crimes, drug crimes, violent crimes, DWIs, and anything all down the line. So get a hold of them at KesslerWilliams.com and our buddy JD, and we thank him. What are we going to talk about tonight, Joe?
You know, we're going to talk about something kind of funny tonight.
All right.
I know we always try to add a little levity into this, but tonight's going to be a little funny. But one of the things that's really funny is Tommy and I going back and forth bantering on what happened and how to do this and looking at some old reports and some old information. But definitely a neat part of our lives back in the day.
It was
2006. We're talking the summer of 2006, where a lot of decisions were made in the Columbus area.
right here in Columbus, right upstairs from our studio here. And one of the things I know we said we were going to do the Wani Wire this week, but Chris Ebner, who we're going to have on to do that, was unavailable, and we weren't involved in that particular wire. So we always want to try to give you a flavor of somebody that was involved in the case with us. So in this case, we were very much involved in, and this is the case of Spook and Bey-Bey, and that is Sammie Jefferson and Eric Earnest.
It is, and the other thing that it is. For us, it was the identification of really the giant BMF connection. I know we talked about Q and stuff.
Right.
We talked about the 90s and all that, but right after when this started a maelstrom of DEA.
It was like a fallout.
Oh, it was insane. But we're going to get to that. So one of the other things that I thought was kind of cool, and Tommy and I are going back and forth, and of course he said a few nasty things to me, which wasn't nice, but we're going to talk about a couple.
You were misremembering shit.
A couple of these street names. There's some pretty cool street names with all this stuff that we always do. So we obviously told you about Spook, Bey-Bey. We got Coffee, everybody. We talked about him a little bit more. Yep. We got Vin Man Smutty. Mm-hmm. We got Reno.
Yep.
Peppy, and Handyman. I don't know where they go from Peppy to Handyman, but it is what it is.
Coke.
We got Coke. We got Death Row. Not Death Row Records.
All right.
And he was not identified at the first initial part of this investigation.
Right.
We got Rusty, Dinah, Dee, Coco, Coke, and then the last ones were Tez, and Ted.
The problem is we're not going to talk about all those people because there's so many arrests in this thing, and so much went on. And it was, like Joe said, it was a 3-month period that all these people went. I think it was June, July, and August.
It was June, July, and August for us, and then we're going to talk about another group that picked up this case and unfortunately swung a couple bats before we did and didn't make it. So I think we just had a better scenario.
And what's interesting about this is, like you said, we're going to do a lot of cases individually as we work backwards and kind of jump around a little bit. But we've heard about the situation that really set this one off. And this was towards the end of the whole thing. And it was after the Wani Wire. So that was over. The things were heating up on BMF because they were in that house up there.
Damn right. So we talked about that many, many times. We always talk about we have to make, you have to be perfect when you're on the other side playing the chess game, right? They cannot make one mistake.
Right.
When you make one mistake, and if we're going to capitalize on that mistake, and this mistake was probably the greatest mistake the BMF made in St. Louis.
The St. Louis portion of it.
I couldn't agree more. So we all know we talked about it, and we had to correct Dogman. Dogman, I'm coming at you again with the numbers. You're way off. But Terry Flannery gets arrested up at that house in North County, and a bunch of gentlemen are up there playing cards. 16 gentlemen are playing cards. 612,332 seized. Jewelry about 800,000. Tons of clothes. 71 phones and SIM cards between 16 different people. That puts us on the radar screen. 2 of the gentlemen that were there were Spook and Bey-Bey, which sealed the fate that they were in the game with some heavy hitters that prior to this, we knew who they were. We knew some of their trickery, but this kind of took us to a different level.
And what happens there is those 71 phones, they're on the other group that we assumed the case from was on Cuffy.
Correct.
And they had a case called Off the Cuff.
Off the Cuff.
And
operation name, Off the Cuff.
And then, so we, through all those 71 phones, several of those phones were of interest to us. And Tommy, like they do with their intel and they're analyzing the phones, said, I think these are the phones that might be interesting to us.
Yeah, what was really interesting about the first off the cuff, they did a couple phones, a couple affidavits. They worked on it for about 2 or 3 months. And while they were going through it, they were trying to do a completely different angle than we were, than what we ended up doing. And they went a different direction with it. And unfortunately, they were on the wrong phones and it wasn't fruitful for them. So they were frustrated and they came to us and said, hey, well, you guys got an open case. And at the time we had an open case, I think on Eric. And we're like, yeah, we'll throw a shot at it, already knowing in the back of our minds that we had a completely different path and we knew it would be a home run. We did not have any clue how much of a home run it would be.
But this was that, like I said, that house up there really, that's, when we go to the Dewani wire, we kind of, there was, okay, and these guys are involved a little bit with the BMF. We had no idea how big the BMF was here in St. Louis, and this is 2006. So
yeah, 2005, 6. You're right. October of 2005.
They went 4 years unchecked here, just rifling dope through here.
So another thing that I thought was interesting is they downplay in the TV series and the documentaries. They downplay the importance of that house. They completely downplay
of St. Louis in general.
I know I don't understand why they did that. And the producers, the G unit, 50 Cent's G unit, we got to get you guys on track. Talk a little bit about the importance of some of the stuff that happened.
That's what we need to do.
Some of the stuff that happened down here.
Right.
But
we get some of the comments and we're wrong half the time. According to them, we're wrong a lot too. But we appreciate the comments, even when they are of a criticism, through criticism. But a lot of them, like, and sorry to go off on a little tangent here, but there's one guy that keeps saying that J-Bo got kidnapped, and then they only would let him go if Meech kept. We've asked everybody. Nobody knows that story, so you're not going to hear that.
No, and they since you went off on a digression here, they went off on the BMF series season 3, I think it is, maybe 2. They went off and they talk about J-Bo's brother getting kidnapped. And I know it's a fictional series, but they introduced J-Bo in that episode.
I've talked to everybody that I've talked to on this thing and I asked them that, and they're like, I don't know about that. I haven't heard that.
Yeah, well, throw it out.
We even had somebody call down to Atlanta to a couple of guys, and they're like, we never heard that.
No. So if somebody knows something about it and they want to talk about it, we're all for it.
Right. Well, we'll go back to the off the cuff real quick. And one of the things I found interesting in there is at one point in time they were going to try to buy dope from Cuff.
Correct.
And they had a kilo deal set up. The Cuff gets hinked up, and he never talks to the guy again.
Never.
It's not, because he got hinked up enough to where he's just like, he wouldn't answer his calls. He wouldn't meet him in person. No. He wouldn't do nothing. So, because a lot of times when we do that and it gets screwed up, we'll run somebody back into the guy just to get the conversation of why it got messed up. So that's that's evidence that it was going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Well, Cuff just said, did you read that part of it?
Yeah, he went dark.
Right. So that was one of the things that, they had a good guy into him, but then as soon as Cuff he just stopped. Well, at the same time, we're getting that information, and we go up on the phone of Eric Earnest and Sammie Jefferson. And the first night, you remember the first night?
It was unreal. So, it was Tommy's first debut in the wire room.
And I got ADHD really bad. So sitting a wire is not my forte. It's not my strength. It's not my strong point. So, but that night, it's about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and get a call between some Mexicans, or get a conversation between Spook and somebody else, talking about some money that they owed the Mexicans, or there was something about a money that they owed the Mexicans. And the guy whose name was either Alex or Ivory. It was 2 guys. There was 2 guys. Alex and Ivory were the Mexicans that we identified throughout this thing. But it starts a conversation with those guys, and then the Mexican, then he does call a Mexican, and there's just a bunch of conversations like that. And I was like, all right. So I called down here, and Tommy and Tommy were down here right upstairs, and they were boozing. And I said, hey, I think I got a pretty important phone call here. It's the first night. And they're like, and I've been known to mess with people, so they didn't believe me. I'm like, I'm telling you, somebody come down here. So Lou, one of the Tommies comes down and says, oh, yeah, we got something. Yeah. And then it went from there. And it was just 3 months of.
So one of the things that I think is fascinating because we're going to use that in every single solitary show.
Yep.
One of the things that's really fascinating, and you got to remember when we talk about this stuff, we're not trying to hurt anybody or make fun of anybody. We like to go back and see maybe the mistakes that we made, maybe the mistakes that the others made, maybe the successes on both sides. But one of the things that Cuffy did that I thought was pretty bright was, number one, when he got a little hinky on that in February, March of the previous year, when they were up on those phones, and he shut that little group off. He completely shut them off, not just the main person, but the main person's friends.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't talk to them, wouldn't do anything. But prior to that, and you got to remember, in October of 2005 is when they hit the house associated with Terry Flannery, and they got all that stuff and put it on the radar screen. So from October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, 7-8 months, they're already talking to the Mexican cartel in Mexico.
Yes.
Again.
Well, through Alex and Ivory.
Right. And again, an amazing feat.
Always hustling.
From St. Louis. Always hustling. Which brings me back to, there is no BMF without the hard work. I know it's a horrible thing to say, without the hard work of the St. Louis guys.
And this is towards the end. Can you imagine what they were doing when we had a blind eye to them?
Oh my goodness. So one of the things that I think is really important as well is, what did we name our operation?
Operation Trickeration.
And why did you name it that?
There's a lot of trickery going on, and there's some coming up, but
especially the money, right?
There's money. There was a couple that we had one where the money was getting counted and redeposited in pockets, and
it was insane. And the thing that really, one of the bad things that we uncovered with this organization in the little 3 months that we were on it was they always fuck their money up. And when you fuck your money up, those sources are always fighting.
That was half the phone calls, man.
It was
them bickering over 2,000 here, 115,000 here. They're leaving town. We got to get it together.
Right.
All that was just constant.
So you gave us a big break the very first day, the very first call session. I don't know why we put you on that. We probably should have put somebody a little bit more.
But I gave it up real quick. Tommy came down and he took it over from there. He's like, I'll transcribe it and the whole bit.
Well, right off the bat, we knew we were on the right side, and we knew that we took and picked the right path for these guys. So what started to happen after that?
And then the early break is we got wire interceptions between Spook and somebody that was unknown to us at the time. I think he called him Spence. He ends up being Spencer Mitchell.
Correct.
And I don't know if it's a nephew of his. They claim to be nephew, but I don't know. But there's a call between them, clearly coded call. It says we're gonna sell some dope here, and it was at the Steak and Shake near, I think it was near the airport. And they pull up, and Spencer pulls up in an GT Mustang, just one of them fast, muscle cars. And there's the obvious exchange is, imagine one hand's one, the other one hand's a bag. Bag goes into the back of the Mustang, and the Mustang goes off. We decide we need to pull the car over. We're like 10 days into the wire.
Right.
So this is, and as we go, you'll see, what we had to do here and do some trickery. But we get I call Mobile Reserve, JJ and Ed Smoot. JJ's the host on our other podcast.
Yeah.
And so we call them. They're a Mobile Reserve. By the time they get to him or get to us and following him, they're crossing the Martin Luther King Bridge. Martin Luther King Bridge, I think.
Going back over to Illinois, right?
Going into Illinois. They get behind him. They pull him over, and they hit, like I said, he had that muscle car. And JJ goes, "What do I do? What do you want us to do if he runs?" I said, "Just let him run." I said,
right.
we ain't messing with no pursuit. Screw all that.
It's not worth it.
Well, that's right. He pulls right over. So when he pulls over, JJ says, just if I remember, JJ, he's sweating. He was very nervous, obviously. And they end up getting the 10 keys. They go back to the Illinois Highway Patrol while we're trying to figure this things out, because we don't want to give up the wire, right? Because if we lock them up for the drugs, we have to say how we knew the drugs were in there and everything that happened. So it ends up with that the U.S. attorneys from both sides decide that they're going to. He had a probation.
Correct.
He's on probation, so they violated his probation as his charge to keep him locked up.
Correct.
So that was.
We didn't have to give discovery. It's called.
Right. So
it's like a chess move on our part.
But there was one more little funny note, anecdote relative to that is it was maybe a week, 2-3 weeks later. We're still on the phones, and Spook gets a call from New York State Prison, and it's an older guy, and so he says, "Hey, what's up with little nephew?" He says, and Spook says, "Yeah, they still got him locked down." He goes, "On what?" And then Spook says, "On that probation violation." He goes, "So you're telling me?" The older gentleman says, "So you're telling me your little nephew gets locked up with 10 keys, and here we sit a month later, and he's only locked up for a probation violation?" He's like, "Hmm." He goes, "Make no mistake about it." He goes, "What you got here is a conspiracy. There's a lot of other motherfuckers going to jail too." And he was right on.
I remember that. I remember that call. That was a great call. That was really good.
We laughed about that for a long time.
We did. And kind of another little fun thing or fun fact about these phones. These were the Nextel phones, and they had the little chirp chirp stuff.
Yep.
So the Eastern District of Missouri was one of the first districts here to write a pen register for the chirp chirp side and a wiretap on the chirp chirp side, which is kind of nice. I mean, this U.S. Attorney's office here was always great to us, and this is when this is the big push for wiretaps in the Eastern District. This is when Jack was here. The wire room went from like 4 stations to 50. Right. They probably spent a couple $100,000, and we had every group was humping on all these guys that we ID'd at that Terry stop. Right.
And we concentrate on Spook and Bey-Bey, but there was 3 other. We did 5 total phones.
Right.
10 different 10 total, but 5 different phones. So, there's a lot of stuff going on at once. And so we're just kind of picking out the highlight stuff. But one of the things that you brought up was the courier that we got. So tell them how we got the courier.
Yeah, we had whenever back then we were learning as we were going too, because we didn't have a lot of people. We knew that Q had the Colombian source, but some of that was kind of at its later stages. So we didn't get a lot of surveillance and a lot of intel and how that works and how it goes. So with this, we were behind the 8 ball a little bit. We were trying to figure out how the Mexicans in Mexico City, and eventually we found out that the main leader, I believe his name was Luis Saiz, was in a Mexican prison, and directing this from prison and getting captured on our phones, calling from prison. I remember a couple nights it was steak night, and they were getting steak delivered and girls and having a good time. He would call
that courier.
Yeah.
And we were on the courier's phone.
And he would call the courier, and we found out that the courier was coming up here to deliver some dope to Spook and Bey-Bey in a Ryder truck out of Oklahoma with some cars on it that were loaded with some product. I think it was weed that time, wasn't it? Or was it cocaine or both?
I think there was some weed on there because we get a bunch of weed, and then I don't recall getting it from any of the guys.
So we get him up here, and this guy was pretty savvy. And one of the biggest mistakes he made was he brought his wife. And when you bring your wife or your wife is involved, you've got to make a pretty quick decision here. So he made the decision.
Yep, he cooperated.
He did, and he helped us.
And I think one of the things that happened right before that helped us identify him, the courier, was that seizure out in Webster Groves.
Correct.
I think that's when we identify him, and then we take him off, and then he immediately rolls.
Yeah, and the seizure was what? It was a considerable amount of money.
600 maybe. I don't know. I don't know. But what happened was on that one is we had another group that was working in Illinois, and they were following around another guy, and they end up at a house in Webster Groves, and they see one of our cars, which was Bey-Bey's black Marauder.
Correct.
And it was parked in front of a house. So they check the plate. They see that it comes back to our case. They know they're onto something good. They do a search of that, a consent to search on the house, and they got a significant amount of money, which was directly related to the money that was supposed to go to the courier. Right. For dropping off the dope. That's where we identify Rice. So unfortunately, we have so there's some trickeration there on both sides, right? So a great name for a thing. But one of the things that did is I was a brand new supervisor. So I was probably a supervisor for only a few months. I was in acting since December, but I think I got promoted in March. Yep. So March, April, May. So Jack is this larger than life character. We talked, Jack does He's been on the show.
Yeah, he does the Federal Fridays with me. So he's on vacation, and these guys come over from the Fairview Heights office. Those are kind of supposed to stay over there. There's unfortunately there's some fighting and some trickeration amongst police officers as well. So they come over here and they do that, and then give us the, oh, by the way.
Right.
So we now realize what happened. We go back.
It's our case.
It's our case. We come to Columbo's and we figure out our plan of action, and we're here. I think I stayed overnight somewhere around here because we
were here when
we were here and we had to go get the money and kind of do it. Well, it caused a big rift between that supervisor and I
groups
in that group. And that supervisor was a long time hell of an agent, did Operations Zora 1 and 2 up in Chicago, just a really good wire guy. He was actually my boss for a little bit. I learned a lot from him. And every once in a while,
take that money from us, though.
Tried to take it, and I knew right then and there that if I didn't stand up, I was going to be a pimp for the rest of my career, and absolutely nobody would ever take me seriously. Right. So I dug my heels in and
we had a little
caused a little fight, and Riley had to come back from his vacation. Oh boy, we went over to Union Station. We discussed it, and I remember looking at those guys, and I looked them in the eye, and I said, you know what? We're all on the same team. I don't play like this. And I got up and I walked away.
All right.
And that was bad. So what happened the next day at work?
Well, they yelled at all of us. He yelled at me and you, and I was like, hey, all right. And then after he yelled at us, he called down and says, you guys want to go boozing?
And then made it all right and did the right thing, and everybody became friends. But I'll tell you, those are those watershed moments in life where you're dealt a scenario or dealt a situation, and how you act in it, especially in law enforcement or the military or a fight. That's it, man. If you don't make the right decision, you're fucked forever.
Yep.
And thank God I made the right decision.
A lot of egos in the drug game, and that they come out in situations like that. But
and how cool is it to have to make those type of decisions? Because the case of the century, your supervisor for 3 months, and this is all going on under your group and all that other stuff. So finish up with some of the cool stuff, and then we'll talk about the group a little bit more. One of the
other things that after we get the courier there and he decides he wants to cooperate, one of the things he does is set up a payment for some dope that's already been delivered.
Yeah.
And so they meet in the hotel room in Kirkwood somewhere. And what happens in that one?
Station.
I wasn't there for that one.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about first. So we go to the room at Union Station, and we get the room next door, and we wire the whole room up, and we got video, camera, audio, the whole nine. No audio, video, and the whole 9 yards. And the money's all laid out on the bed, and there's a money counter there. So as the Charlie takes the money from, I think was it Eric, or was it? I think it was Bey-Bey.
From what you guys tell the story is Bey-Bey.
I think it was Bey-Bey. So he drops the cash off, and they're counting it, and then the Charlie would take the cash that was counted and move it to another side of the bed. When the Charlie would turn around and grab another stack of cash, Bey-Bey would grab that cash and put it in his pocket. It was just the more trickeration with the money. No honor, hustlers, man. No honor, definitely street hustlers. No honor amongst thieves. But I remember we were laughing so loud in the room next door that we were concerned that we were going to blow the up, and we let it go. We counted the money, we kept the money, and we let him go. We didn't arrest him then. That was just a chess move. But to see interaction like that between those people and have us watch it, it was just hilarious.
So then Rice would then have to report to the guy in prison that he got the money taken from him on a car stop, and we provided him with the paperwork that said they got stopped, and so we just kept this thing going. And then one of the other things is these guys, I mean, if they weren't dealing dope, they were gambling, chasing gals.
Oh, it was funny.
Clubbing. Dice. I mean, these guys are all over the place.
They love to play dice. They loved it.
Remember, we thought we thought they were talking in codes because they were getting some dice delivered, and so I think we're setting up on Spook's house at the time. Lived out in North County, and waiting for these dice to get there. And we're thinking, okay, they're getting a shipment through the mail. It was really dice.
It was dice.
So you take your guess on what they might have been. They accusing nobody of nothing, but there was also a call on the wire where Bey-Bey calls Spook and says, "Hey man, you got your piece on you?" And he's like, "I'm at home." And he goes, I need you to come up here to the dice game. He's like, why? He goes, I'm kicking these motherfuckers' asses. And he goes, and I ain't got my piece on me, and it's getting froggy. It's getting a little messy up here. So he had to go up there and so nothing happened. But I just want to say these guys were just a hoot to follow.
They were. They actually played some dice. I will not mention their names, but they played some dice in Las Vegas with some pretty
claimed them, yeah,
serious NBA stars back in the day.
Right.
They would talk about it on the phone, but we don't know who they
boxers,
are, if it's true, and all kinds of stuff. But they were street hustlers.
Yes. And then Sammie even says he took a couple million from Meach in a dice game or something.
Oh, really? I don't.
One of the shows.
Wow. So something that comes out of this wire, and then I want to talk about the kind of the last big crescendo that we did, and that was kind of interesting with the Charlie.
Right.
So one of the things that come out of the show is one of the calls early on was about entering the BMF, and there was a $250,000 entrance fee. I've never heard that before until this set. So the old group's wires and our wires. So if anybody knows that to be true, please let us know. But it was $250,000 to join the BMF right around 2005. Now, St. Louis was so engaged in that prior to that. I can't imagine these guys coming up with
and then some of the other, just to, these guys were tied in with, to go through all the cases on how we got the little, information and arrest all these people. But Anthony Styles is involved. We'll talk about a case with Markeith Huggins here, Juan Bates, Royce Davenport, Prentice Bruce. Those are just some names off the top of my head. It wasn't just these guys. I mean, they were running around, like Joe said. We 3 months of, we were working 18 hours a day.
It was. So you gotta remind me towards the end, because I want to say something about the BMF and the rise and fall. But I I remember we had a great U.S. attorney. He's no longer with us at this time. My God, he was the best. He would do anything for anybody. He was a hell of a litigator. He was an awesome court attorney. He was a bulldog, which was his nickname. Played catcher for Dartmouth, I believe. I think he was a pretty good athlete. Brown, Dartmouth, whatever.
One of them.
One of those nice schools. But our last little big crescendo on this, and we were getting a lot of pressure from the U.S. Attorney's Office to kind of flip this thing around and be done with it. Our Charlie had met a few people at a club, and I don't remember what club it was. And they got into some talking, and through his connections with the Mexicans in Mexico City and the guy that was in jail, it was a pretty legitimate connect, and they wanted to purchase cocaine from him. So we did what's called a reverse, where we tell you to come bring us or show us the money for the cocaine. You walk away with it, and then we'll get you the drugs, and we'll meet you in a different spot. And it's great information. It's great for breaking out the conspiracy and lengthening out some other people. So we do it in Kirkwood, and we do it in a hotel. And hotels are the worst place to do anything. The walls are thin if you're in a shooting. There's one way in, one way out. So we never really liked it. And at the time, Jack was our boss. And Jack was okay. He let us do it. He knew I was nervous because it was one of my first big things. But I had great agents and great city guys. So they set all up. And I'm in the parking lot outside, kind of listening to the radio, trying to figure everything out as we're going. And I look over, and there is a Corvette with like 30-inch wheels, a hoopty Corvette. And I'm like, what the fuck is that? And that is our ASAC, Jack Riley, in a seized car, drawing attention to him. And there's counter surveillance in the parking lot. I'm like, oh my God, look at what's going on. But it went well. I think they brought us about.
That was when Mark Huggins, Darwin, Markeith Huggins, goes by Mark Huggins, and that was set up by the Courier.
Right. They met him through Spook and Bey-Bey in a club.
Yep.
And a great little anecdotal story to a great wire. But so here's kind of what I wanted to say towards the end, and then give us the stats of this thing, Tom. Because
on the Mark Huggins one, and that one is that they told Mark to meet him in a hotel room again. They counted out the money. He's supposed to bring 340. I think he brought 329. It's never ending. And then when he left, we took him off, and he got set up for, like I said, a 20 key deal. But this was a pretty impressive case when you look at all the numbers. But the other thing that happened in this case that I thought was very significant is this whole group had a beef with somebody, and I don't know who the person is because we couldn't identify him on the wire. But
right.
And then they showed up to the club that was right across from Maggie O'Brien's, and it was like just on the other side of the street.
Was it by the FBI building? That
it's
one, different club.
It's to the east, just east of Maggie O'Brien's, across the street same side of the street.
Okay.
Used to be the Have a Nice Day Cafe. Don't know what it was called at that time.
Okay.
But they were all, we're on surveillance and they're all going to this club and everybody's showing up. It's getting crowded. And one of them spots the guy that they're beefing with and then calls another one of them and says, "Hey, you need to take that motherfucker out." He's like, I got him. All you got to do is leave. Once he leaves, I got him. And so Tommy, so I called Tommy, or Tommy called us. This is about to happen. And I called the 4th District Sergeant, and a bunch of police cars are going to be flying down there in a second. So what Tommy did was call the sergeant and just said, "Hey, just send police cars with their lights and siren on down there, just so we can stop this from happening." And it happened. So, not all, it saved somebody's life, I'm sure. So that was a good thing.
So to kind of bring us all the way back full circle in the BMF, this is the beginning. We already said this is the beginning of the downfall for them in St. Louis. And it's all derived from the arrest of
because we go
Terry
backwards
Flannery.
a lot.
We do. We go backwards a lot.
Right.
Terry Flannery. So if we go back and just picture this for a quick second, the BMF's whole premise was to bring everybody together, to form this unstoppable unit of sources and cocaine and no fighting. And the very first thing they do is they put that stupid ass billboard up, and that brings attention to them. The second thing are those club fights and those big club deals. That brings attention to them. The shootings at the clubs, that brings attention to them. And then boom, because of all that, we are now on Terry. We're now on these guys. We go to them when we realize that it's Terry's there and he's got an active warrant for that first big round of the indictments on that side. And that brings attention to everybody in St. Louis. Now, we knew about St. Louis. So this whole thing that they try to create,
we never knew it was this big.
We never knew it was this big, but by them creating it, they also killed it.
Right.
By their actions.
No, and that became a fun, that whole era was just a ball. I mean,
it was 2.5 years, right? 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah, it was just a fun era of cops and robbers, if you want to call it.
Absolutely. And trickery.
Trickeration, a lot of trickeration on both sides of the fence. Because when we get into some of the other stories will be just like this, because a lot of them are going to be individual now. Got that Donald White, I think that's a neat case. He did some, I think it was a murder for hire with their stuff. And these guys are all tied together, and we'll tell you how everybody's tied together as we do these cases. But, this case really started with, it started with off the cuff. So kind of tied in, and it kind of, this is kind of spawned when we really knew that these guys they were moving tons of dope.
Right.
And they would move it any way they could.
I want to say, and we'll have to correct me as we go through this, but I want to say this was the last time we ever saw a source like Luis Saiz. Spook and Bey-Bey kind of, when this went away and Cuffy went away and
I think there was other people because they hustled so much. Just Anthony Styles had him, and I'm just using or trying to connect dots, guessing a little bit. Anthony Styles was a big mover and shaker. Yeah. Mark Huggins got his dope previously from Danny Jones. We know that from him interviewing Danny. So as these sources dry up, that's why when we keep saying in all those shows, that's why they keep going and keep trying to get sources and always have plugs and keep them close to them. So
yeah, then that opens them up. It opens them up.
Right. So that was a fun case for us. We got a couple other ones that are coming up. We got that one with the Stephen Henderson. I might as well just say his name because he'll be brought up. That's a good one. And he was on he used to be a customer of J-Bo's and
right.
So got a lot of other interesting cases coming up. You got anything else to say, Joseph?
No, that's it. Just thanks for listening.
All right. Thanks for listening.
No. I do have one.
Go right ahead, baby.
I forgot. So this is one of my favorite shirts. Obviously, I'm a Southside Chicago kid. We were talking about it a little bit earlier. So many of you know or don't know that Pope Leo is now the Pope. He was picked unanimously by the First Ward in Chicago. I don't know how they got in the conclave, but he was picked. Second, we've already talked to him. He gets like 6 dispensations, and those dispensations are miracles, we might call them. He's already put 2 of them out there for the White Sox to win the World Series this year and next. So 2 in a row.
That should count for all 6 of them.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
That's all I want to say.
Like, subscribe, and share. Peace.